Kids? Yeah? Cool. All right. I'm glad you're here. As I said, hello. I really enjoyed Mike's session this morning, as I hope you guys did. But I am going to give you the opposite advice from him, which is to make games. And I see a real need, not for pointless games, not for frivolous games, although that is a kind of art. But there are a lot of things that we need to teach kids to do. And if we go about it the boring, straightforward way, it's not at all appealing. When you turn it into a game, it becomes something addicting, something cool, something they actively want to do. And there's a lot of room in this space to be making things that are useful, that are for social good, and that are fun. So don't get turned off from making games. Make sure you can make money from your games. Make sure they get funded for their development, but go ahead and make games. So this is me when I was, 12. I just want to make sure you guys know that I am among you. I'm a developer, not a designer. Although in the past couple of years, I've started trying to learn that because it seems cool. But yeah, I've been programming since computers looked like that. That was some of my first generative art in Logo. And actually back at the time, there were a lot more girls programming too. As you can see from the picture, there's just that one boy in the corner. So yeah, I'm a developer. I was a Flash developer back when that was a thing. It's not a thing anymore. Not really, unless you're doing video or hardcore gaming. So at around the time that Flash was disappearing, I also had a kid. And this made me start thinking about the stuff that kids do, the way my kid was interacting with my devices. We taught him to walk by my husband and I handing my iPhone back and forth with a little movie playing on it, and he'd like toddle toward it. So I started thinking about stuff for kids I never had before. Do you guys think about kids at all? Do you have kids? Some? Do you make stuff for kids? Okay, fewer. Yeah, so I have a kid. It's really cool. He's really cute. He loves Transformers right now. So as cool as he is, there are things that he needs to learn that he doesn't know how to do yet. And it's my job to help him learn those things. And one thing that was really super hard for us was transitions, being cool with things changing, like being cool with the transition from being at home to getting in the car, or getting out of the car to get in a grocery cart. Those sort of things were kind of challenging for us. And so I was introduced to an analog tool that therapists already know helps kids with this sort of thing. And it was a big pain in the butt. It was like made out of a piece of cardboard that I had to Velcro little squares onto and off of, and I had to carry all these squares around, and I had really just wished that it were on my phone. So being a developer with the tool set to make these things, I started going about making this app. This is an early, this is not released yet, this is sort of an early preview, but it's an app where kids can see pictures of what's going to happen next, and they can interact with them. They tap to move from one to the next. At the end, they're sort of a reward for finishing all of the tasks. And as I started building this game, or useful app presented as a game to kids, I realized I didn't know how to do it. I'm, again, a developer. I'm not a user interface designer, but I had to learn that if I was going to bring this app into the world and have it look a little better than this. For example, when kids are interacting with these squares, what should they be doing? Should they be tapping, double tapping, swiping? How do I make it so they can go forward and back? Like if they accidentally tap something, what sort of sound effects should I be using? What kind of animations? How do I make sure that it's interesting enough without being overbearing? So these are the questions that I started asking. And started finding answers to, and that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So if you want to start making something for kids, the first question you have to ask yourself is, which kid? Which kid are you making it for? There are little kids, and there are bigger kids. They grow. There are actually many, many levels of ability, both what they can do with their hands and what they can think in their minds. And in the App Store, there is a section for kids' apps. This is new from 2013. And you can see down in this corner that there are 3 different levels to help parents find apps for their kids. So that's split into ages 5 and under, 6 to 8, and 9 to 11. And those illustrations kind of show, older kids can do more complex stuff. So my app is geared toward preschoolers, and whatever age you're developing for, you're going to want to observe how kids of that age interact with devices, learn what they can do, what their basic capabilities are. So I'm going to put this question to you guys. What do you observe from this picture? Interaction. Yep, she's using it. She's using an iPad. She's focused. Hard back? The case. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. This is actually a picture from a maker of an iPad case. She's using one finger. Someone said right-handed. Yep, one finger. What's her other hand doing? Resting on this really big case, but if you don't own this case by this company, that hand might just be resting on the iPad. One more thing I'm looking for. It's sitting on her lap. It takes up her whole lap, and she has it in landscape orientation. So yeah, even with just, this is just one static picture of a kid, but we were able to learn a lot about, okay, it looks like she's using one hand, like she's able to use one finger to touch it. She's sitting there focused. It's in landscape orientation, and she's resting her hand. So I can't tell you all of this sort of information and deeper for every age, but I will tell you more general things so that you'll know what to be thinking about as you explore the age that you want to develop for. So there are a lot of touch gestures that are possible to use in apps, and you don't want to use all of them in apps for kids. Some of them are way more intuitive than others. The most intuitive one is tap. And you might actually think that that's really straightforward, but kids can tap too long. In iOS, there's a difference between a tap and a long tap. So you want to make sure that even long taps get registered as taps. Kids can tap multiple times. They really expect something to happen when they put their finger down. And if it doesn't happen immediately, if they've touched down and nothing happens, they might think, okay, I'll do it again. And now they've done a double tap because they didn't see anything happen. So the other best practice there is to register touch events on touch rather than on release, so that the kid gets as immediate feedback as possible that their input was registered. Drawing is super fun for kids. They love just putting their finger down and tracing letters or drawing freeform. The main thing to think about with drawing is that kids can have difficulty with continuity of touch, with keeping their finger down. So just know that if you're asking them to draw, for example, the letter A, you may need to account for them drawing a segment and lifting their finger up, and then getting back into the activity and drawing the next segment. So support partial completion where you can. Swiping is also really intuitive, especially if there's some sort of visual indication that they should do it. Just a couple of caveats for swiping too. You want to make sure that there's nothing with a hit area on it in the area that you want them to swipe over. And yeah, make sure that you show them that you want them to swipe. Dragging is also really intuitive, but kids are developing their motor skills. So young kids especially may need a larger hit area than the, 144 by 144 that you would use for adults. So make it big. Make sure that different interactive elements are placed far enough apart that your app won't get confused about what they're trying to pick up and drag. Okay, so that was 4. I'm giving you 4. Make your app with 4 gestures. Here are ones that you should reserve unless you find a really good use for them. Pinch zoom is kind of a complicated thing. This is the first gesture of the ones I've talked about that requires 2 fingers to coordinate and work together and do something at the same time. And we all understand it really well, but it's not an obvious thing for kids who haven't learned it yet. Shaking and tilting is hard for some young kids given the heft of a tablet. And for me, it's just terrifying to see my son pick up and start shaking my iPad, right? Like, I don't want that thing to fall. I would like to keep my iPad. So while you may think about making a driving game where you want the kid to pick up and tilt and shake and whatnot, just think about whether that's something the kid is going to be able to handle without breaking the device. Multi-touch, as with pinch zoom, is harder for kids to understand. So whenever you can get something done with 1 finger, do it that way instead of requiring 2 or 3 fingers. That goes for tapping or swiping or any of those actions. And flicking and flinging are not as intuitive as tapping and dragging. So if you want kids to fling something, you really have to show them how to do it through instructions in the app. And lastly, double tap is tricky just because of the timing. For us, it's, we've learned how to do it. A 3-year-old doesn't know that it's like tap, tap, and that's it. One good place that you can use double taps is if you want to, say you have a next button to get to the next page of your story, but you don't really want the kid to interrupt the story, you want to be sure they mean it. You could have that next button require a double tap, so kids are less likely to just buzz through the whole story and have to listen to it page by page. Okay, so that's gestures, and now I want to talk about the flow of your app, what happens from the moment that they touch the icon and get into the app through how they play it and get to the end. This character here is Super Y. He's an American cartoon character. He teaches kids how to read. And in the Super Y app, he greets kids at the beginning. So I'll show you a little clip of how that goes.
Super Y's Story Saver. Super You, I need your help. We need to finish each story sentence to save the day. Super Y, to the rescue! Look, it's a page from Cinderella. Let's read.
Okay, so the kid taps on his face and suddenly is starting to be guided into the activity. So this will make more sense if you have a brand, like if you're Sesame Street, then Elmo is going to help a kid through the app. This is more obvious in some cases than others. You can also invent your own character that is friendly, either like a friendly child or a friendly adult voice. Both are okay. Or this app called Bobo Explores Light uses this robot who doesn't even talk, but he can flash this beacon on his head, this antenna, and when you tap it, then he shows you something new that you didn't see before. So this is a slightly different concept from greeting. This is called guiding, having the character stay in the app for the kid to ask questions to or refer to throughout the activity. You also want to be sure that the goals of your app are intuitive and visually explicit. So the more fundamental an interaction is, the more visually interesting you're going to want to make the part of the screen that they need to touch to do that activity. This is an example of basically just a really simple puzzle game for young kids. You can see in the menu that you can pick which shaped puzzle you want to do, and you see the completed puzzle there. And I'll play the video. So you can see all the shapes on the side are colored and textured, where the rest of the screen is brown and boring. So it becomes immediately obvious to kids that they want to interact with those elements that are colorful and textured. For instructions, you should know that kids don't always respond only to audio instructions. So if you have a voice, like the Super Y voice, telling kids finish the sentence, and then you don't do anything more, they might not know what they're supposed to do. So you should make something visual happen on screen too. This can be accomplished a lot of different ways. It can be done through highlighting an element, making it glow, giving it a little animation, or if it's a gesture that needs to happen, illustrating it with a hand. So I'll play a video of this too. These animals need to bring a package to the zoo. And so you can see they were sort of led into the activity. The kid got to pick what car the guy was going to drive, and then is shown, okay, now you're going to need to drag your finger around to make a road for this car to drive on. And then actually, you don't see it on this slide, but at the top there's the zoo, and that is also blinking to remind kids you have to get the package to the zoo. So the elements that you want kids to interact with, you want to make visually distinct in some way from the background. And in the example I showed you just a couple slides ago with the puzzle pieces were more textured and colorful than the background. I think this app is really interesting. It's a sticker app, so you just drag stickers from the side and put them on the background. But here the background is, a photograph, part of it is a photo of broccoli acting as a tree. So that part is actually, I think, more visually complex, and the parts you interact with are simpler. Either way you want to do it, just make sure that they're different. And if you want to use color to draw attention to an interactive element, make sure that it contrasts with the background enough that kids are going to see it. So like a bright yellow or orange are often good choices, depending on your background. So kids are going along, they're using your app, and then maybe they're not. Maybe you've told the kid, you've given them some instruction, you've told them they need to get the package to the zoo, and then they're not doing anything. Your app should notice how long it's been since the kid has interacted with it, so that you can start offering reminders or give little hints or clues, or maybe even if a long enough period of time goes by and the activity isn't essential, that your app just automatically moves on to the next thing. So the guidelines for this are that you would wait between 3 to 5 seconds for stories before you pop up a reminder, and between 6 to 8 seconds for games. This is, I think this video actually came out a little choppy, but yeah, so you can see I'm not interacting with the game at all, and it's just popping this little blue dot around being like, well, maybe you want to touch this pig, or maybe you want to touch the wolf, or actually it's been so long since you've touched anything that I'm going to pop up the arrow for moving on to the next screen. Wrong answers. Not all activities have right and wrong answers or a linear path, but if the app that you're making does ask kids to answer questions, then you have to recognize that getting the answer wrong is part of the learning experience. So you don't want to be mean. I mean, I doubt any of you are going to go out there and like be mean to kids in your apps, but the best way to deal with this is actually a sort of tiered approach. So this is a game called Casper Scare School, and you have to put together costumes. So you see a picture maybe of a pirate, and then Casper presents all of these options of like, do you remember which were the pirate's pants? And do you remember which were his boots and his hat and whatnot? So here, the kid has chosen the wrong one. So the first time that they pick the wrong one, you might say something like, that's not it, try again. Just give a message of encouragement. And if they get it wrong again, then you can say, that's not it, we're looking for the pirate's pants, try again. And if they get it wrong again, then give them a little more information. I think the pirate's pants are blue, or whatever. And then you can even visually highlight that. Say, tap on the pirate's pants. And now you're giving them a lot of clues to help them get it and move on. So it's not bad to be wrong. Kids need to be wrong in order to learn the right answers. So just guide them compassionately through that experience. When kids get stuff right, they also should get some kind of reward. It doesn't need to be something huge, but just an acknowledgement like, wow, you traced the letter A, great job. Or having the letter A like wiggle and shine in some way helps them feel like, yeah, I did that. That was awesome. Your app can also have payouts. This is the term for rewards, these payouts that happen at certain intervals. So maybe after the kid completes 3 or 4 sets of the activity, maybe after they've drawn A, B, and C, then you could have them get a sticker. And it's always best if the payouts relate to the activity. So maybe you let them pick which sticker they want. Do they want a sticker of the letter A or B or C? I don't know why so many apps use stickers as payouts, like these stickers that they never persist from one session of the game to the other. So every time your kid starts, they start collecting stickers from scratch. But at least my kid really loves them. He's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get the ladybug next time. So something that, yeah, you wouldn't think of doing for adults, but it's really effective with kids. Okay, so I talked about wrong answers and right answers, and now let's talk about what kind of feedback you can give even if your app isn't providing a linear experience with right and wrong answers. Your app should be responding to what the kid is doing. So if you have a character sitting around on the screen waiting for something to happen, and the kid is not doing that thing, you can still have the character moving around. You could still have the character's eyeballs following whatever else the kid is dragging. So here's an example of that from an app called Toca Kitchen. And if you guys don't know, Toca Boca is a maker of apps for kids, and they make some really awesome stuff. So definitely check them out. I'm gonna try to feed him hay. So I don't know if you could catch it, but the kid was making like tiny gestures with his body. It wasn't just staying still. This is a trick that puppeteers use also, which is to not have the puppet ever stay completely still. And then even before I tried to bring the hay to his mouth, he's already saying, I don't want to eat that. That's for a horse. Inside of your app, you need to make a way to get out from that part of the app to other parts of the app. So if you have a game that's maybe a level-based game, you need to make sure someone can get back to the home screen so that they can get to other levels. And the best practice for where to place this is at the top of the screen. Because remember, we saw that girl's hand resting sort of at the bottom corner. We don't want kids unintentionally touching that. So if you put it at the top, that's less likely to happen. And with storybooks, it's advisable to make it possible to go to any specific page. So here you can see it's being shown really visually. It's not like a slider in a movie, where you kind of scan forward or back. You really want to visually show everything that could be clicked on. Your apps should also have a level of organization and continuity that we may take for granted. It's probably going to sound really obvious when I say it, but similar things should look similar and be grouped together. This is an app called Spy Mouse, and he's going to go through a bunch of levels, and then he's going to get to the boss level. So all of the normal levels are these blue dots, and when he gets to the boss level, that's a white cat. This is the volcano area, but there are all other stages of the game that have their own illustrations, which are kind of arbitrary. But what they all have in common is they show the normal levels in blue dots and the boss level as a cat. So just think about how to present that sort of information in a consistent way for kids. And finally, they're going to get to the end of the game or the end of the activity, and so you should think about what you want them to do after that's happened. Do you want them to be able to go to the home screen? Do you want them to replay the activity they just finished, if that's only a small part of your game? Yes, and for this, you may want to record when a kid has already gone all of the way through your app, because the next time there may be some things that you let them skip through that the first time you didn't let them skip through, right? If they've already done the whole thing and they only want to go back to certain parts, you should let them do it. Okay, so that's the flow of the app from beginning to end, and now I want to explore some of the user interface elements and text and audio that you may have inside your game. So scrolling is totally cool, it's fine. Side scrolling like this is easier for kids than vertical. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, you know what side scrolling is, but that's side scrolling. Kids don't think of the screen in the same way that we do as adults who interact with web pages. So especially putting stuff below the fold and needing them to scroll vertically to that, is a bit confusing and unintuitive for young kids. They think of the landscape screen more like a TV. They're not thinking of it as a book that has hidden content somewhere else that they can't see. So just make sure that anything that they have to interact with to move on to the next thing is immediately visible on the screen when it loads. Don't make them go and find it off of the side of the screen. For indicating more, there are a couple of ways to do this. But it's best if you give more options than less. So this is a game called Bad Piggies. It's really fun. It's a physics-based game, and you can make like arbitrary machines. When I took the screenshot, I just left this one that my kid had made. And you can see he's excited about the pumpkins like on top of the propeller. I don't know. Anyway, there are all of these elements that you can use to build your cool vehicles, and you can get to more of them. So this app allows you to either to scroll by dragging the picture to the side, or using a button with an arrow to tap to get to more. So it's nice to just give kids those options. So here I'm dragging. And here I'm using the buttons. And finally, for your buttons, don't use words on them if you don't have to. There are really standard, a really standard set of button iconography out there. You know, the pause button, we all know. That kind of loopy arrow is a replay button. Can you guess what the light bulb is? Help. Yep, someone got it. So take a look around, see what the other apps are doing. But there's really a pretty standard set for this. And what you accomplish by doing this is making it so that a kid who is not yet able to read is able to interact with the app on their own without requiring the assistance of a parent. And that makes kids feel more proud that they were able to do an activity by themselves. And it lets mom cook dinner or whatever, you know, that she's trying to hand off the iPad to the kid, you know, so she can get something done. You know, as like a theoretical thing, not from experience. So there are times when you need to have text in your app. If you're teaching kids to read, you're going to have text in your app. If you're reading them a story, there will be text. So let's talk about how to handle that. Well, again, you want to make sure reading is not required unless it's required. So I just wanted to show you an example of an app that is completely non-verbal. These islands that you see represent different levels, and the island looks exactly like what the level looks like. So let me play this video. So I clicked on the cake, and now we're at the cake level. Oh, and that's the plum tree level. So you heard there was music, and there were a very limited set of pictures, and this app doesn't require any language at all. If you are reading a story to a kid, then this may seem like common knowledge, but you probably want to highlight the word in the text in sync with what the audio is doing. Sesame Workshop suggests that this highlight be yellow. I'm going to show you an app where it's red. I think that's up to your discretion. You just have to make sure it works for the age that you're doing.
Oh, Grandma! What big teeth you have!
All the better to eat you with, my dear.
I love how Little Red Riding Hood is like ready to rumble with the wolf. She's badass. When you do this, you should also give parents the choice to turn it off so that if they want to read and participate in the app together with their kid, that they're not forced to go at a certain clip, that they can pick their own pace. The fonts that you use in your app should be sans serif fonts for young kids especially. In the US, kids are taught how to write using this Zehner-Bloser method. I don't actually know how to pronounce it. So you want to use letters that are like the letters they're using in school. Any of you type nerds will know, like you can have a double-decker or a single-decker G, those sorts of things. Make sure that you're using the ones that kids learn in school. And finally, for text, if you're having a counting activity, it's a good idea to put a counter on the screen. So you may have audio happening, but you should also have a counter on the screen to sort of reinforce what numbers look like. And it's better if it's off to the side and not on top of the objects that are being counted. The object and the number don't have an actual association, right? Counting is about the collection and not the individual objects. So here's a short clip.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So you can see she was counting, and then that popcorn bag in the corner was updating with the number. Okay, so let's talk about audio in your app. It can kind of mesmerize and calm your kid in a way that your app wouldn't without some sounds. If you're giving audio instructions, you want them to be concise. This is kind of a counter example. It's a picture of a book that has a lot of words on it. It's a storybook, so that's okay. Stories are going to have words. But the reason I chose this image is that you can see that very last thing that he says is, "So please do not turn the page." So the very last words that the kid hears are, "Turn the page." And that's what you want the kid to do. That's how you get to the next activity. So whenever you have instructions, especially if you have to say 2 or 3 sentences, make sure that the actionable instructions are at the end. Make sure they're the last thing the kid hears, so they don't have to remember it from the beginning to the end. Do you guys know this book? It's so awesome. It's called There's a Monster at the end of this book, and Grover puts up all of these barricades, like, starting basically Three Little Pigs style, like with weaker materials and then nailing boards to the pages, and he doesn't want you to turn the page to get to the end of the book, and you find out that he's the monster at the end. It's really super cute. All right, with audio, you should think about whether it can be interrupted. There are times when you will want it to be, and there are times when you aren't. So here you can see from the highlighting that this sentence is halfway read, and a kid might decide, oh, I don't like this page, I want to swipe and go to the next page. So you, as the developer, get to decide whether you're going to let them or not. Generally, if the audio is non-essential, you should let it be interrupted. If it's core to the activity, then make them wait. You can also use sound effects. You should use sound effects. Again, kids expect immediate recognition that their user input has been registered, so sound effects are a great way to do that. And then on top of those sort of things, you can build some kind of fun ones in. So this is an example of an app for teaching kids letters, and the letters make the sounds that they represent.
Oh.
I did that so well, right? I mean, it only took me 2 tries. Yeah, so you heard sound effects for getting it wrong, for getting it right. She said the letter, and just sort of a side sound effect that the O could make on its own. You can also use sound in combination with visuals to indicate interactivity. So your app may kind of go back and forth between the kid doing an activity and then you showing them some sort of reward animation and then getting them back into doing the next activity. So sound is a good way to signal moving from non-interactive back to interactive. This is an example called Peekaboo Trick or Treat, where the doors make a kind of knocking sound and you're supposed to touch them. And when you do, they open. And then after you've seen the character inside, you tap again. And then there's a zooming out that happens. I'll just show you the video.
Dragon.
So you saw it zoomed out, and then the doors started clacking again. So that's the signal to the kid, okay, we've moved out of the zoom out animation, and now you get to interact with the app again. Background music is useful at times. You just want to be really deliberate. Please don't make it annoying, because parents are going to have to hear it a lot. And watch the volume. Make sure that it's not too loud, that it's distracting from the actual activity. Here's one that I think is a nice ambient sort of background music.
K. K is for kite. Kite. L. L is for light. Ooh. Light.
Ugh, light. You know, don't you feel like you're on an island or something? It was relaxing. Yeah. All right, so lastly, I want to tell you what you should include in your app for grown-ups and how. We'll talk about why this is changing in a minute, but you should include a section for parents and make it look as boring and uninteresting as possible. It's up there in the upper left. You see the for parents text. It's just text. There's nothing visually exciting about it. And when a kid taps on that, you should show what's called a baby gate, which comes from the analog world of like putting a gate up in your doorway so the baby can't get through and fall down the stairs. A baby gate will it should require the user to do an activity that you don't expect a user of that age to be able to do. So this is an example, again, from Tokaboga, where you'll see that I try once, I tap it once, and it gives me one instruction, and then I click the big X because I'm young and I don't know what to do with all of those words. And then I try again, and it gives me a different set of instructions. So even if the kid is able to observe the adult doing it once and wants to try to do it again, they're out of luck. Okay, so swipe left with 2 fingers. Nope, not gonna do that. Now swipe right with 2 fingers. And when I did that, it brought me into the parent section, which gives me some instructions about how to interact with the app. Hopefully your app is so intuitive that it doesn't require a long page like this, but you may want to expound for parents on what the learning is that happens in your game, or how they can interact with their kid to make it a bonding thing, to make it a together thing. Now, this is starting to change, but legislation is starting to happen around ways that we have to protect kids' privacy. In the US, we have COPPA, Child Online Protection something. So your app should abide by it. There are starting to also be organizations that you can register to be a part of and get badges that you can include in your app that say, I can be trusted. I am going to disclose to you what sort of information I'm collecting, even if it's just anonymized usage information and error reports and analytics. I'm going to tell you about that. I'm going to tell you if this app connects with any social networks or with the wider internet in any way. I'm going to hide stuff that requires you to purchase it behind a baby gate, that sort of stuff. Okay, we have 2 more slides. I know I'm slightly over. Help, it's shown that adults don't actually go to a special help section to look up the help. So really just build it into your app. It could be as a sort of modal dialogue that people see the first time they come through your app. But don't rely on parents going to a special section to learn how to use the app with their kids. They expect to open it and have it be obvious. And finally, registration and login. You want to make as simple a process as possible. Don't require anything more than you have to. And it's okay to assume that a kid is going to be helped in this process of adding a user by an adult. Just make sure that after the user's been added, the kid can recognize it themselves, and they don't require the adult to find their name and log them in every time. So this is a good example that has pictures. The kid can pick their own picture even if they don't know how to spell their name yet. So this slide is just here. It has links that if you go see the slide deck later, you can click on. A lot of what I talked about today came from the Sesame Best Practices Guide. That was my first introduction to this stuff. And then Moms with Apps is that badge program. The Developer Exchange Facebook group doesn't sound like it has anything to do with development for kids, but it is only developers of kids' apps talking about issues relating to kids' apps. So whenever there's an iOS update or other SDK update, people will ask, like, how did you deal with this? Or they'll say, my app got rejected for such and such reason. How did other people deal with that? So click on that link. It's a really useful group. And do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, we have a mic here, so if you have a question, just wait a second.
I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
One is, where do you search for great apps for kids? And the second one, do you have any method for a non-stressful way of taking the iPad from your kid, after she's done or he's done with playing?
Okay, great questions. I look for great apps for kids just in the App Store. If you Google best apps for kids, you'll find all sorts of lists that people have made. I just downloaded an app. I don't know what it's called. But come see me after and we'll look at my iPad together. That sort of groups not just apps, but movies and TV shows and whatnot by what's age appropriate for different kids. And yeah, so there are resources out there. I just Google. Or for educational apps, yeah. Actually, in the App Store, it will there will be different categories of. So once you click on one of those ages, it will ask if you want to do like a game or a learning activity or a creative thing. So the App Store kind of breaks them up for you. And I mean, I'm kind of a graphics snob. I want it to be pretty. I want it to look like developers put their hearts into it. So I kind of choose based on pretty. My son chooses based on whether there's a robot or a rocket ship on it. Yeah. And for taking an iPad away from a kid, I suggest countdowns. This actually goes back to my own app. One of the things that you could have in those 4 pictures is pictures of 3 clocks, and then the sign for all done. And if you tell your kid you have 3 more minutes, and then it's going to be time to do, you say whatever other activity, then they can start to get it in their head. Okay, that's going to happen, and you say, okay, 2 more minutes. They don't have to be real minutes because kids don't have a concrete understanding of how long a minute is. It could be 30 seconds, it could be 5 minutes. Just as long as you give them an introduction to the idea that change is coming, that can help.
Question. With how many kids are you testing your apps per session or per iteration, and how many of them are like total newbies that haven't been using apps before, and how many percentage are kind of experienced child users, app users?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and my app is actually not at the place where we're testing it with kids yet, so I can't speak to that. But there are people who go into schools or go into preschools and will test apps there. I don't know how you go about getting approved to do something like that, like how you get them to agree to let you come in. I feel like it might be WGBH in Boston that goes into Boston area schools to test their apps. So try Googling that. Maybe you'll find something. Hi.
Okay. Hi, Kathryn. Thanks for the insightful talk. I have a question about the pictorial buttons that you've talked about. Most of the apps that you've showcased do indeed have them. However, in my opinion, they're very symbolic and very arbitrary. For example, the loopy arrow for replay, or the little gear for settings. These are symbols well known to adults. But for example, how come does a kid know that an X in the corner closes a window? So what is your take on these actually? And do you think there's perhaps a better way for these icons to be intuitive? Are they intuitive at all for kids?
Okay, great question. I realize I'm supposed to be repeating the questions. Sorry, tech guys, my bad. The question is, how are pictures any better than text buttons at the beginning? Because kids don't know what the pictures mean the first time that they see them.
No, and actually, text is even worse, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just that if it's the first time for the kid using an app, is standardization of these buttons alone enough to make these intuitive?
Yeah, so the first time that your kid encounters any button that they haven't seen before, they will ask. They will ask you, what does this mean? Or they will just click on it and see what happens. But they do quickly learn that the triangle means play. And when that's standard from one app to the next, and they see it in a different color, in a different context, it doesn't faze them. They know, okay, if I click on that, something's going to play. So yeah, I think the standardization is really what's important, that that kids can learn something from one app that applies to other apps that they use. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathryn, for a great talk. Nice to hear that. I have a question about the gestures.
Okay, where are you?
Here.
Okay.
Here. A question that you said that kids cannot do pinch, zoom, or things like that. It's very hard for them. Do you know what is approximately the age that they start to understand such gestures?
No, I don't know what age pinch zoom. I mean, anecdotally, my 5-year-old can do it now.
Okay.
He could start doing it when he was 4, but I don't think he expected to need to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. There's a question up here.
Yeah, great. Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering about parent and child interaction inside an app, if you have any sort of experience with building sort of duplex applications, because you were talking about separate instructions for parents, but not so much about if they could maybe interact with the child within the same app.
Yeah, there are a couple of apps I can recommend that you check out. Tokaboka has an app that is a store where the kid sits on one side and the adult sits on the other side. And so one person is playing the role of the cashier and one is playing the role of the buyer. And it's all, just on the one iPad. So there's sort of an order of the salesperson picks out what the store is going to sell and then hangs out the shingle that the store is open. Then the customer can pick what they want to buy. Then they have to give money from their coin purse to the cashier. And yeah, so there are games that are meant to be played either between two kids or between a kid and a caregiver. The other one, a new one that came out recently, is called Drawing Together. And that's one that requires 2 devices, but you can draw on the same picture, like color in the same picture together with one person on one device and one on another, which can be fun for like grandparents who are distant or whatnot to be able to talk on the phone. Actually, it has calling inside the app, so to have be talking to each other and doing an activity together.
Are there any questions more?
I'm here all day, so feel free to find me out and about. Thanks, guys.